Sotah Daf Gimel continues working through our last Mishnah, which gave a number of halachas of things which can be said in Lashon Arami or other languages, and some things which can only be said in Lashon HaKodesh. The Gemara will give the sources for those, bring some related comments, and then get into the location of Har Grizim and Har Avel. So let's begin the daf. We're in the middle of the list and we're discussing tefillah, which is Shemona Esrei. So the Gemara says Shemona Esrei can be said in any language because it's tefillah, it's prayer. In prayer, you should pray in any language which you understand. You can pray in whatever language it is. You're asking for mercy, and therefore it should be something which you're relating to. So the Gemara asks, is it true that it can be in any language? But Rav Yehuda said a person should always ask for his needs should not ask for his needs in Lashon Aramis, that is in the Aramean language, because Rabbi Yochanan said anybody who asks for his needs in Lashon Arami, the Malachei Asharis are not going to help him. They're not going to attend to his ear and bring his tefillah up. And the reason is because the Malachei Asharis don't understand Arami. So Gemara says it's not a kasha. If it's an individual praying alone, he should use Hebrew. So to make sure that the Malachi should use Lashon HaKodesh to make sure that the Malachei Asharis bring his tefillah up to Shemayim. However, if he's in a tzibur, then he can use Lashon HaKodesh, then he can use Arami, because he will have attention to his tefillah because it is part of the tzibur. The Gemara asks, is it true to say that the Malachei Asharis don't understand Lashon Arami of a brayso that brings two incidents that says otherwise? First, Yochanan Kohen HaGadol said that he was in the Kodesh Kodashim doing the Avodah, and he heard a bas kol, he heard a voice, which is broadcast by the Malachei Asharis, who said that the Pirchei Kahuna, the young Kahanim, have gone to wage war against Antioch, against the headquarters of the Greek Empire, and then they were successful. And the second one is that Shimon Tzaddik, who was also Kohen Gadol, he said that he heard a voice from the Kodesh HaKodashim that said that the Avodah is batel, it is no longer. The one who said that it's not, that is the king of Rome called Graskalgas. It's a Greek king called Graskalgas. He has been killed and his decrees have been canceled. And they checked the time, and that was the time that it actually happened. But both of these statements were made in Arami. So how could the bas kol, which is Malachei Asharis, make this claim, make these announcements if they don't understand Lashon Arami? So Gemara gives two answers. The Gemara says it could be that just the one malach whose job it is to say the bas kol, he knew Arami. Or it was even possible to say that it's the Malach Gavriel. We know that the Malach Gavriel knew all the languages because he taught Yosef HaTzadik all the languages when he stood before Paroi in Mitzrayim. Okay, next we move on to we return to the list of things which can be said in many languages. So Berachas Hamazon is on the list. So we don't need a source for that. We wouldn't have any reason to think otherwise, but the Gemara gives a source. It implies it can be in any lashon which you are mevarich, as long as it is a mevarich. Next is Shvuas HaEidus. That's learned out of a pasuk because it says V'nefesh ki sechata v'shama kol ola. So it has to be a shama, it has to be in any language that you understand. As far as Shvuas HaPikadon, swearing that one does not have a pikadon in his possession, that's a Gzeira Shava from the word Techata. For Shvuas HaEidus, it says Techata here and it says Techata there. And now we go to the list of things which have to be said in Lashon HaKodesh. And what is the source for those? So the first on the list is Mikra Bikurim, the psukim which we read when we bring Bikurim. And also, next on the list is Chalitza. And there the Mishnah itself gave us a source because it said V'anisa v'amarta, V'lefnei Hashem leikecha, and V'anisa, V'anu halavim v'amru is the same type of language that's used when the Levim declared the blessings and the cursings at Har Grizim and Har Avel. And just like that is Lashon HaKodesh, this is also Lashon HaKodesh. The Gemara says, how do you know that those Levim have spoken Lashon HaKodesh? So that the Gemara says is because you have Gzeira Shava from the word kol. It says kol ram in this discussion, and Moshe Rabbeinu speaking with HaKadosh Baruch Hu at Har Sinai, it says Ya'anenu b'kol. The term kol appears in both places, which links to two, and just like Moshe obviously brought the Torah from Shemayim and Lashon HaKodesh, these Levim must have also spoken Lashon HaKodesh. Now, as far as Chalitza, the Mishnah had a machlokes. That was one source, which we said was the Rabbanon. There's another source, and so Yehuda, who learns out of the word kacha, that the woman who performs the Chalitza has to say kacha yeyaseh. this shall be done. So the kacha, this means that this has to be done in this right way, in this exact language. That's Rabbi Yehuda's makar. So Gemara says, what do the Rabbanan do with that kacha? They say that it's learned out of Anisa v'Amarta, v'Ana v'Amra. So the Gemara says, they say it's needed for something else to show that all the activities, all the actions are ma'akev, they have to be done. And therefore, kacha, you have to do exactly this. Now, what does Rabbi Yehuda learn that from? So Rabbi Yehuda says, because if it would have said only that, it could have said koi yase. Why does it have to say kacha? What's the extra chaf for? Well, that's to teach me that the words also have to be spoken in Lashon Kodesh specifically. Now, Rabbanan don't hold of that drasha. They say there is no extra limit from the koi kacha. Then the Gemara says, how does Rabbi Yehuda know the Chachamim's drasha? Why doesn't he use v'ansa v'amra, which the Chachamim used? So the Gemara says he needs v'ansa v'amra to learn the other way, to learn from Yibum to the Levim, to teach me that the Levim is said their kalalos in Lashon Kodesh. So Gemara says, but we already said before that you could learn that from the Gzeira Shava of Koil to Moshe Rabbeinu, who said Kiminenu b'Koil. So Gemara says he doesn't have that Gzeira Shava. He does not have a Messiah to make that Gzeira Shava. He has a Messiah for the Gzeira Shava Aniyah, but not the Gzeira Shava of Koil Kol. And the Gemara brings a brisa which matches up with this. Brisa says Rabbi Yehuda said anytime it says Koi, Kacha, or Aniyah, anything which is used those terms to describe, it has to be Lashon HaKodesh, and because these things are all linked together. So Koi, for example, is Koi Sevarcho as Bnei Yisrael, Kacha is Chalitza, and Aniyah as by the Levim. All these things are linked together, and therefore we know that they're all Lashon HaKodesh. The Gemara now refers back to the Mishnah and moves on to discuss the positioning of Hargrizim and Har-Evel. So we'd seen the Mishnah had mentioned that they were next to Shechem and Eloin Meireh, Evar Yarden. So the Gemara quotes in Machlokes how you read the pasuk which describes it. So the pasuk says, "Halehema be'Evar Yarden achrei derech mevay hashemesh be'eretz haKnani hayeshiv ba'arava mul hagagol eitzel Eloin Meireh." A lot of ways of describing Hargrizim and Har-Evel. So the Gemara says there's two opinions as to where this was. The first opinion is Rabbi Yehuda, who says that this was far from the Yarden. It was deep in Eretz Yisrael, much further west. And he interprets the psukim as describing that they are far away. So it says, Be'eretz HaKnani hayeshev. So it says first, Halehema be'evar Yarden. That's far from the Yarden. Me'evar Yarden. Achrei derech mevay hashemesh means far into the setting sun. So it is Achrei derech means beyond the way. It always means far away in the direction westward. Remember, we're talking to Klal Yisrael when they are still on the eastern side of the Yarden, and the pasuk is describing where Hargrizim and Har-Evel are. Now, then it says Be'eretz HaKnani hayeshiv ba'arava, and that is Hargrizim and Har-Evel, which have Kanani on them. Those are the Kusiim. Mul HaGilgol, because it is indeed near the Gilgol, which is far into Eretz Yisrael. Eitzel Eloinei Meireh, that refers to Shechem, like Shechem is referred to as Eloinei Meireh in Parshas in Chumash Bereshis, like it says Vayav Avram Ba'aretz Ad Meklem Shechem Ad Eloin Meireh. Now there Shechem is deep in here. Eloin Meireh also refers to Shechem. So this is all Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Now, I have a brisa that brings Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yaisi, who he comments on this before we bring the arguing opinion. He comments and says, I told the Kusim that their scripture that they have is false, and I showed them because they don't have anything, and I explained to them, you don't have anything here, because they say that Eloinei Meireh refers to Shechem. We also say that Eloinei Meireh refers to Shechem. We have a source for it, this Gzeira Shava, but you, what source do you have? So then the Gemara quotes the conflicting opinion, which is Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar holds Hargrizim and Har-Evel are right near the Yarden. His source, because it says when you will pass across the Yarden, that means right after, on the same day as you cross the Yarden. So it must be near the Yarden. Now, how do you understand Acharei derech mevay hashemesh? That means far from the setting sun, far from the west, meaning much further east, much closer to the Yarden itself. That is where Hargrizim and Har-Evel are to be found. Now, it's also called Eretz HaChivi. The Canaanim who live there are the Chivi. When it says Eretz Kanani, it means the Chivi are there, and they live in the Arava. So it's not really Arava, it's between the mountains, which are on the western banks of the Yarden. And it's a bit of a problem that it's called Arava. And what does it mean when it says Mol HaGilgal if it's nowhere near the Gilgal? So on this, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov explains that the Torah here is not giving landmarks to find the Har Gerizim and Har Evel. What it's doing is giving us instructions as to how to travel. Just like when we left Mitzrayim, we had the pillar of cloud and fire which showed us which way to go. We're not going to have those on the west side of the Yarden, so it's giving us instructions. So it says Baderech, that means go in the roads and don't travel in the fields and the vineyards. Hayoshev means go in the Yishuv, go in the villages, don't travel in the wilderness. Ba'arava means to travel in the plains and not to travel in the mountains. Now the Gemara quotes a brisa, which we won't finish the entire discussion, but it begins by discussing how Klal Yisrael crossed the Yarden. So it says every day the Aron would travel after two flags of Klal Yisrael. On the day that they crossed the Yarden, the Aron went first. Like it says, Hine Aron Abris, Adin Kol Aretz Oiver Lefneichem. The Aron is going before you. Every other day, the Levim carried the Aron, the Bnei Kahas. Today it was Kehanim. And it says, now you see Aaron, when the feet of the Kehanim carrying the Aaron went into the water, that is when they were able to cross through, because the Yarden stopped over there. Rabbi Yossi points out in a brisa there were 3 times the Kehanim carried the Aaron. One was when they crossed the Yarden, one was when they surrounded Yericho, and one was when they put it back in its place. They brought it into the Kodesh Kodashim in the days of Shlomo HaMelech. Now, the Gemara continues, once they put their feet in the water stopped and possibly even reversed, allowing them to cross